In the year 1840, a young boy named Booker Webster experienced a moment that would remain etched in his memory forever. Having been captured by the Comanche several seasons earlier, he had learned their language and integrated into their society. However, on this particular day, a significant change occurred. The tribe members were lamenting, expressing profound grief over the deaths of several leaders who had been slain during what they perceived as a grave betrayal at a council meeting with the Texans. The mourning intensified, and Booker witnessed the men severing their sacred hair, a powerful symbol of their sorrow. Concurrently, the women, in a poignant display of their despair, used knives to inflict wounds upon their arms and legs, engaging in a ritualistic manifestation of grief. Yet this mourning marked only the onset of a more ominous turn of events. Anger swiftly supplanted their sorrow, and Booker observed in dread as the preparations for a more sinister ritual commenced. Fires were ignited and stakes were readied. He comprehended the impending horror. Although Booker was fortunate enough to be spared, having been adopted and safeguarded by his Comanche mother, other white captives, primarily women and children, were not as lucky. These captives endured unspeakable tortures, not at the hands of the Comanche warriors, as one might anticipate, but rather from the women of the tribe. Often eclipsed by the men's notorious reputation for violence, the Comanche women were, in many instances, even more ruthless. Life for Comanche women was arduous, arguably more challenging than that of the warriors. While they did not hold the same social standing as the men, their contributions were essential for the tribe's survival, as they were responsible for nearly all tasks outside of warfare, hunting, and weapon crafting, including the creation of clothing, tools, and housing. It is reported that a Comanche woman could assemble a teepee in merely 15 minutes and dismantle it in 5, readying it for transport on horseback. This efficiency was vital for their nomadic way of life as the tribe traversed the Great Plains. Upon the men's return from hunting expeditions, it was the women who skinned the animals, preserved the meat, and tanned the hides. Their responsibilities intensified when buffalo hides became highly sought after in trade during the 1800s, leading to increased prosperity for the tribe and prompting men to take multiple wives. In this polygamous culture, a woman's productivity directly correlated with her value. Comanche women were recognized for their practicality. Unlike the men, who valued their long hair as a status symbol, women typically kept their hair short for practicality and to reduce the risk of lice and ticks. While men adorned their faces with black paint for war, symbolizing death, women opted for brighter colors such as reds and yellows, distinguishing themselves while sharing the fierce spirit that characterized their people. Despite many Comanche women being under 5 feet tall, they exhibited remarkable toughness. Although not formally warriors, they were skilled riders and archers. In a society frequently facing threats, they needed to be capable of defending themselves and their families. During attacks on Comanche camps by outsiders, it was not unusual for women to fight with the same ferocity as men. Accounts from Texas Rangers and U.S. soldiers recount instances of Comanche women fighting to the death, blurring the distinction between combatants and non-combatants. Aware of the grim fate that awaited them if captured, slavery, abuse, or worse, surrender was never an option. The strength of these women extended beyond the battlefield. They played a vital role in instigating raids, and when warriors returned with captives, it was often the women who administered punishment. In numerous instances, this resulted in severe torment, as observed by Booker Webster. Nevertheless, not every captive met a fatal end. Some individuals, including Booker, were integrated into the tribe, albeit with inherent dangers, particularly for female captives who were perceived as threats by Comanche women. The struggle for dominance within the tribe could be vicious, exemplified by the experiences of captives such as Matilda Lockhart and Rachel Plamer. Matilda Lockhart, who was taken at the age of 14, suffered unimaginable cruelty at the hands of Comanche women. By the time she was released to the Texans in 1840, she was barely recognizable. Her nose had been severed, and her feet had been scorched to prevent her escape. Such acts of brutality were typical among the Comanche, viewed as a means to uphold the social order within the tribe. Rachel Plamer's narrative serves as another harrowing illustration. Captured during the notorious raid on Parker Fort in Texas in 1836 while pregnant, Rachel endured relentless beatings, leaving her skin perpetually raw and bruised. Following the birth of her child, the infant was killed, a calculated decision as the child was regarded as an impediment to her labor. The relentless abuse drove Rachel to the edge, often leading her to consider death as a release from her suffering. On one occasion, she openly defied a Comanche woman who commanded her to retrieve a digging tool, hoping that this act of defiance would result in her demise. The woman assaulted her, knocking her to the ground, yet Rachel survived. In a particularly harrowing episode, Rachel found herself engaged in a savage struggle with another Comanche woman, encircled by men who cheered and jeered. The two women clawed, bit, and wrestled on the ground. In a moment of sheer desperation, Rachel seized a bloodied buffalo bone and stood over her opponent, astonished that she was still alive. She could not comprehend why the men, who observed with such apathy, chose not to intervene, neither to rescue her nor the other woman. Their indifference was palpable. The confrontation came to an end, and the men scattered as if nothing had transpired, leaving Rachel in a state of confusion yet relief. However, her struggles were far from over. An older woman, evidently offended by Rachel's previous encounter, sought to assert her dominance. She ordered Rachel to collect straw for a fire, with the intention of incinerating her. By this point, Rachel had discovered a renewed determination to survive, and once again declined. This ignited yet another fierce conflict. As the flames from the fire began to engulf them both, the older woman attempted to push Rachel into the inferno. The men, entertained by the scene, chose to remain passive spectators. Amidst the chaos, the women managed to break one of the lodge poles supporting a teepee. Despite her injuries, Rachel triumphed once more. The following morning, she was called to the men's council house, anticipating some form of retribution. To her astonishment, they merely requested that she mend the lodge pole she had damaged during the altercation, with the stipulation that the older woman who had assaulted her assist in the repair. This entire episode left Rachel perplexed. What she failed to grasp at the time was that these altercations among women served as a means of establishing social hierarchy. Unlike the men, who were preoccupied with hunting, warfare, and tribal affairs, the women maintained their own social order, with disputes often resolved through physical confrontations. The men, disinterested in the women's internal dynamics, allowed these conflicts to unfold organically, sometimes even for their own entertainment. Interestingly, these fights occasionally fostered improved relationships. Following Rachel's initial confrontation, she unexpectedly washed the face of the woman she had defeated, leading to an unusually amicable relationship between them, demonstrating how these customs reinforce boundaries and mutual respect among women. This hierarchical system among Comanche women unveils an aspect of their culture that is frequently overshadowed by the men's prominence in warfare. Although these women appeared to be oppressed, they exhibited remarkable strength and independence in their own right. Rachel's situation, however, was distinct from that of many other captives. She was enslaved by the tribe, regarded for her labor, and was intended to be ransomed in due course. Despite the harshness of her existence, she held some value in the eyes of the Comanche. In contrast, not all captives received such treatment. Many, particularly those deemed useless, faced a far grimmer fate. In 1840, the conflict between the Comanche and Texans escalated dramatically when Texan soldiers attacked a group of Penataka Comanche, resulting in numerous fatalities during what was meant to be a peaceful council meeting. The Texans had insisted that the Comanche return their white captives, but when the captives failed to appear, violence ensued. To the Comanche, this assault was an unfathomable betrayal. Upon learning of their leaders' deaths, the warriors severed portions of their sacred long hair as a profound expression of grief. However, it was the women who manifested their sorrow in a more harrowing fashion. Comanche women entered a frenzied mourning state, crying out and inflicting wounds upon themselves across their arms, legs, and even breasts. Booker Webster, a young boy who had been captured by the Comanche, later recounted witnessing women resorting to even more drastic measures. Some severed their fingers, while others inflicted such severe self-harm that they succumbed to their injuries. Yet as their mourning transformed into rage, the women turned their wrath upon the remaining white captives. While the Comanche men readied themselves for battle, it was the women who were left to exact retribution on the prisoners. They committed horrific acts of torture against their captives, both adults and children, mutilating their bodies, cutting and skinning them before setting them ablaze. Some of these executions extended for hours, while others persisted for days. For the Comanche women, this was not merely an act of vengeance. It represented a significant cultural tradition. Inflicting harm on their enemies was believed to ensure that those souls would suffer in the afterlife. Within the Comanche perspective, their authentic tribal identity, the Numena, signified the people, and they alone were deemed deserving of existence. All others were viewed as outsiders, fated to endure dire consequences if taken captive. This somber ritual was regarded as an anticipated aspect of life on the plains. Should the situation be reversed, the Comanche women anticipated facing a similar fate. While the men engaged in swift combat on the battlefield, it was within the safety of the camp that the women found the opportunity to express their fury against their foes. They took pleasure in these actions and collected trophies, mirroring the men's practices during their raids. For settlers on the frontier, the mere thought of being captured by the Comanche instilled terror. Yet being taken alive to their camp was often perceived as a fate worse than death. Those familiar with the customs recognized that the true horror awaited them at the hands of the women, who were equally, if not more, ruthless than the men. The frontier was a realm of perpetual dread, where survival frequently hinged on evading capture at all costs.